Yo, what's good YouTube? It's boardzy, and this is going to be a comparison between the Lamzu Atlantis and the Pulsar X2, two of the best mice that have come out in 2022. Very similar mice, so I understand why people have been asking me to compare them. So both of these mice are available for under $95, have 3395 sensors, weights in the mid 50 gram range, and just all around like top tier performance, but not at the $150 price point that those mice are generally at. But similar in most cases, the big difference between these mice is going to be the shape and just the overall in-hand feeling. So I'm going to get into that. Obviously, one thing with the Pulsar X2 that is an advantage is there is a mini size. So the shape is going to accommodate more hand sizes, while the Lamzu Atlantis is definitely a medium to large size mouse designed for claw grip. It's a very wide mouse, so if you don't have at least decently wide hands, it probably will be like a shape that feels a bit overwhelming, similar to the XM1R, which was just too big for a lot of people. So the Pulsar X2 is by no means a thin mouse, but it's definitely thinner than the Lamzu Atlantis, and the X2 Mini is thinner than both of those, making it the best mouse for fingertip of these three, in my opinion. None of these mice are going to be really bad for fingertip grip, but the X2 Mini is definitely the best. With the X2 Mini being 53 grams, having very flat sides, and it's basically just a perfect shape for fingertip. It's also a good shape to claw if you enjoy small mice for claw grip or have small hands. So there is a lot of versatility with Pulsar. Lamzu did tweet that they have plans to release a mini version of the Atlantis shape weighing in at 49 grams, supposed to come out late November, so it obviously is 2 months away, and if you want the mini mouse now, just go with the X2 Mini, but that is something worth considering if you do have smaller hands but do like the overall profile of the shape. I'm sure a lot of people are wondering which is the better option for claw grip between the Lamzu Atlantis and the X2 Medium, and it's really going to come down to whether or not you use a relaxed claw grip or an aggressive claw. If you play relaxed claw, the X2 is definitely going to be the shape for you. Because the sides on the X2 are so flat and don't really flare out, it's designed to have your fingers straight on the mouse. If you curl up your fingers a lot, you'll notice that the shape just feels very wide and blocky towards the middle, so you are going to want to be gripping it at the top, in my opinion, to get the the best experience with the shape, but that will vary hand to hand. If you do use an aggressive claw grip though, it's almost a guarantee that you will prefer the Atlantis' shape, especially if you've used and like the XM1 shape. This is very close to that shape. It does have a slightly more centralized hump than the XM1 does, so it won't feel as high profile in the back of your hand, but the shape is still made to be pulled into the back of your hand, so very good for aggressive claw. The curvature on the sides feels very natural, and it's just a shape that you can feel very locked in and stable with. Another thing to note is weight distribution and just balancing, because even though the Atlantis and the X2 Medium are both 55, 56 grams, the Atlantis definitely feels lighter in motion since it is a longer and wider mouse. The weight is just being distributed more. It's like the reason why the Death Adder V3 Pro feels pretty light despite being in the mid 60 gram range. So it's also worth mentioning both of these mice are going to have incredible in-hand feelings, but the distribution definitely just feels slightly less dense on the Lamzu Atlantis. And you can still pull off a relaxed claw grip on the Atlantis. You will just want to have large hands, because if your hands are too small, you'll probably just be forced into a palm grip. But yeah, the real difference with the shape is the curvature on the sides and the profile of the hump. One thing that's kind of interesting is the LA1 from Lethal Gaming Gear. This is not a final sample. The mouse is still not slated to come out super soon. But I do have this final version of the shape, and it definitely compares very well to the Pulsar X2. It's more like a larger version of the mini version than a smaller version of the medium. The LA1 is thinner than the X2, and it has a higher profile back hump, so it makes it better for aggressive claw grip styles. It kind of gets aggressive in your palm, similar to the Zowie ZA13, but it's not. Nothing's really as aggressive as the ZA13, but the mouse being thinner and higher profile, it just makes it feel a lot better and less blocky for claw grip than the X2. Also, you can see that the sides are more significantly curved. So all around, it's a very comfortable mouse. You can see that the coating is like a fingerprint magnet. That's one thing that's being changed for the final version. But yeah, the LA1 is 52 grams. The distribution feels really good. The button grooves on the main clicks feel very locked in, similar similar to something like Zeiss Rail. So this is a mouse that when it releases, I think is going to be a very popular shape, because while Pulsar went very flat and just not an aggressive shape at all, the LA1 is definitely more aggressive in a few areas, and after my initial testing at least, it does feel better in the hand for claw. So yeah, I just wanted to quickly talk about the LA1 because even though it's not released yet, it is still similar to these other mice, being a claw grip shape, low 50-gram weight range, 3395 sensor. So yeah, it's pretty similar. Shape does work for fingertip grip as well. But yeah, now the X2 and the Lamzu Atlantis, I'm going to talk about the clicks now. So the Atlantis has Huano blue shell pink dot switches, and these switches are really tensioned extremely well. There is slight wobble, but it's really not noticeable at all. No issues with pre or post travel, just a snappy, good click feeling, no issues with spammability. The Pulsar X2 uses Kale 8.0 switches by default, but I do have a sample of the X2 with Huano blue shell pink dots. And is that a sign of something to come? You tell me. But the Kale 8.0s by default are not the most tactile and premium click ever. They are very spammable, and after like spamming them a lot, they definitely do like soften up a bit. So definitely not the highest overall click quality. I haven't had any issues like with actual pre-travel or grinding like I did on my original X2 mini copy, so it does seem like they addressed that issue. But there is this like faint squeak sound that I get sometimes when I spam the clicks. Doesn't affect it in game at all, but I think Pulsar is addressing that for a future batch as well. But with the Lamzu Atlantis, I really have nothing to note about the clicks aside from the fact that they just feel extremely premium. The X2 sample with the Huano switches has a lot more of a tactile response. The clicks are slightly heavier, but you do get a more like solid confirmed feeling similar to the Huanos on the Lamzu Atlantis. So I will definitely give the edge and click feel to the Lamzu Atlantis compared to the X2 with Kales, but at the end of the day, both are going to feel solid in game. There's no issues with the click latency. You can adjust the debounce time in both mice's software, but in the future, an X2 with Huanos may exist, and that may have a better click feeling than the current X2. Moving past click quality, in terms of build quality, I honestly have no issues to note with the Pulsar X2. I had those click issues on my original batch, but there is no issues with side flexing, any type of creaking. All of the buttons feel tensioned well. With the Lamzu Atlantis, basically the same thing. If I do squeeze all the way at the bottom, I do get some slight creaking, but that's not like you would ever be squeezing there in game. And I did see this issue, and I can replicate it, where it does seem like the mouse is very unstable if you tap it from an angle, but again, no issues with that when you're actually gripping the mouse. For me personally, I did see a few people complaining about that though, and I could only imagine it's due to something with the implementation of the base. But those are just minor nitpicks, because overall this mouse has a very solid and premium feeling in hand. All of the buttons feel tensioned well. There is a bit of post travel on the side buttons, but nothing that really causes a massive issue. The side buttons do have a very sharp overall feeling on the Lamzu Atlantis, and they are very large, so I would say that the positioning is good on them for claw grip. It's just they are not going to be the most spammable side buttons. The Pulsar X2 has pretty thin and small side buttons, similar to the G Pro Superlight style side buttons, but there is no mushiness on them. So it's a very clicky and very spammable side button. I would give the edge and side buttons to the X2, but it's going to be very passable on both, especially if you don't need to spam on the Lamzu Atlantis. You'll probably find them to be some of the most premium side buttons. One thing that both mice really lack is a great coating. Both just have pretty slippery, plasticky feeling coatings. One thing I mentioned in my Atlantis review was that the XM1R has a much just grippier and more rubberized feeling coating, so I do feel like I'm a bit more locked in with that mouse. So in a perfect world, they would update this with a rubberized coating, but I don't know if that will happen. The coating's not terrible at the end of the day. Both mice have solid stock feet. The Atlantis no longer comes with free glass skates in the box. I would say that the PTFE feet on the Atlantis are slightly better, but there's absolutely no problem with the experience with the Pulsar stock skates. In terms of the tech and wireless implementation, there's really not much to discuss. Like I mentioned, both mice are using 3395 sensors, which are a step up from 3370, so it's nice to see them being available at still what is an affordable under $100 price point. You can enable motion sync on both mice. There's no noticeable tracking or LOD or DPI deviation issues. The wireless experience is just all around really nice. Both mice are obviously charging with USB-C cables and come with wireless adapters. The battery life does seem to be pretty well optimized on both of these mice, lasting around 2 weeks on a full charge. So really just nothing negative to say about the implementation. It's nice to see that like premium wireless tech is becoming the standard. The sensor position is a bit more forward on the Lamzu Atlantis, so if that's something you like, you might be able to notice the slightly more responsive, faster feeling, but it's something that you really get adjusted to no matter what, unless the sensor position is really low, in my experience. I think that about covers most of the features. Both mice are using TTC Gold scroll wheel encoders, but the Atlantis does have a slightly looser wheel feeling. You can definitely notice each individual step more on the X2. At the end of the day, both wheels are solid. The wheel is more spammable on the X2 though. So yeah, in conclusion, which is the better mouse? Which should you buy? I don't think I've ever done one of these videos where I just had a hard answer, and that won't be the case here. If you do have large hands, well, actually, yes. If you want a mouse that feels like the XM1 in wireless form, just go with the Lamzu Atlantis. It's not even a question. Endgame Gear did announce that they are going to begin production, I believe, in late October on the XM2W, so that's like, it's still a ways out. So if you are looking for that kind of shape for claw grip, by all means go with the Lamzu Atlantis at $90. It's an insanely good buy. If you are looking for a mouse that's going to be good for fingertip grip, go with the Pulsar X2 Mini. Also, if you just have small hands in general, you're probably going to want to avoid the Atlantis or wait for the Atlantis Mini. But the X2 Mini is definitely a mouse that works for small hands claw grip. With large hands, I do prefer the X2 Medium though. And if you do have a medium to large hand, it's just going to come down to what shape you think you're going to prefer. The X2 Medium is a smaller shape. It's going to feel lower profile in your hand, but it's still going to feel very blocky and limited in terms of mobility. The Atlantis is a better fit in my hand, but I don't feel like I necessarily aim better with it than I do with the X2. The X2 does seem to have an edge in terms of availability though. Like, you can just go to Pulsar's website right now and buy one, and they've been doing a good job of keeping it in stock. Meanwhile, the Lamzu Atlantis is being shipped in pretty small batches to retailers across the world, so it's not exactly as easy to buy. So yeah, if you do think the Atlantis is going to be like an endgame mouse for you, I would say it is worth waiting out on and just trying to cop from whatever batch you can. And hopefully one day Lamzu can keep them as a in-stock item, but I would say for most other cases, most hand sizes, you'll be more than good enough with the Pulsar X2. And yeah, I just hope this video helped. I hope it gave people an idea of which mouse is for them, and I don't know, if you have any other comments, leave them below. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and peace.